as we're talking today, because I want to be able to send you guys this, this when we're done. Yeah, the recording's working. Okay, so entrepreneurial productivity structure and habits are the key to success. So what I'm sharing today is a lot of the things that have helped me be successful and how I've automated things in my business. I don't know if you guys have seen these statistics, but most small businesses don't survive the first year, and then it progressively, obviously, fewer survive over the course of 10 years. I suspect that many of you on the phone have experienced the pain of starting your business and have worked through some of those pain cycles. What I love to do is help businesses through effective leadership and human resources. So I believe that the 4 pillars are your people, how you bring them on and onboard them, as well as develop and engage them throughout their career, the processes you have within the firm, how you measure performance, and then how do you get those key outcomes like profitability, sales, impact, customer satisfaction, and so forth in terms of business success metrics. What we're going to talk about today are a number of things. So again, people, we'll talk about how do you build habits, what are those triggers that help you build habits. We'll talk about the use of technology, time, processes, and the future. So I'm sure some of you have got teams. I'm not sure if all of you have teams. This is a model that I learned from somebody named Allie Brown when I was in a mastermind program. For those of you who may not have teams and you're wondering when should you bring somebody on board, it's this is a good decision tree. So are you making enough money to support you and your business? Yes or no? Are you consistently making sales? Do you have a solid team and processes in place? And then you go from there. So I often use this with firms who are saying, well, who should I hire first and how should I kind of build out my model? Because my expertise is in HR and compensation, I often help companies design their organization so that they can get the right people on board in the right order in order to maximize sales and impact. One of the other things that I have been frustrated with over the years when I worked in many firms was the size of meetings and the number of meetings. And I sometimes think that my escape from the corporate world was motivated by the fact that I was tired of sitting in ridiculous meetings that didn't really drive outcomes to the extent that I wanted them to. Jeff Bezos has a 2 pizza rule. And so I would tell you that if you're setting up a meeting, think about the number of people you're inviting, and are you keeping it to the number that you could feed with 2 pizzas, which is about 6 to 8 people depending on their appetite. So make sure you're managing your meetings wisely. The other thing I would say as it relates to people is that recognizing, rewarding, and then resetting are important tenets to managing a workforce. Feedback is a gift to give and receive, but setting expectations and resetting people's behavior by having upfront difficult conversations with folks is also very important. So a lot of times when I'm coaching my clients because they've got an employee relations issue, I will say, well, why don't you start off the conversation with the phrases, I'm confused, I'm concerned, or I'm curious. And then you start sharing with them what is the behavior, very specific behavior that you saw happen. What are your feelings about that? And then what's the impact if it continues long term? So I think of the acronym FBI, feelings, behavior, and impact, as a way to summarize the feedback you have for folks. When I was managing a team in the corporate world, the doctrine of completed staff work was something that I used a lot. And this comes from there's different stories about where this comes from. The idea is that when you're an officer, a staff officer, you would never give a commander something that isn't complete. So when I would teach people how to provide me with complete work, it was about studying the problem, presenting a solution, and then all that I need to do is look at it, read through it, have a discussion with them about it, and then I approve or disapprove. And so this is a good model when you're trying to develop someone to get their half-baked ideas into more complete thoughts and more complete recommendations. It's a good model to use in that instance. There's both a US as well as a Canadian flag on here because I don't quite know which country it originated from. Networking. What I loved when I saw the faces on the screen today when I joined this call was there were many of you that I've already met. And I don't like the idea of networking. I do like the idea of making friends. And for people who struggle with the idea of networking, if you think about it as making friends, it maybe feels a little bit better. I also took a class many years ago from a gentleman named Scott Halford, who's a speaker and author here in Denver. And one of the phrases that I remember from that class on influence was what you see on the screen. Were they made better for having been in your presence? So sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes it's about listening to them and what their needs and wants are, and then being there to help them through whatever it is that they need help with, business or personal. Habits are essential. There are 4 R's of habit. So there is a reminder, so a cue or a trigger. So in this example, a traffic light turns green. Then there's the second thing, the action you take, the habit itself, drive through the intersection. And then 3, the benefit you gain from doing the habit, right? You get closer to your designation. And if the reward is positive, then you'll have a desire to repeat it the next time the reminder pops up. And then this repetition forms a new habit. So I'll give you an example, a very powerful example of someone who did this and really helped them in their career as well as the firm they worked for. In 1993, a bank in Canada hired a 23-year-old stockbroker named Trent Dismud. And Trent had 2 jars on his desk, and he had 120 paper clips in one. And then the other jar was empty. And what Trent did that was different than his peers, he didn't look at the analysts or stock quotes or anything like that as a stockbroker. He just started making sales calls. And he wouldn't do anything else until he had transferred and had 120 calls made, and he transferred 1 paperclip at a time into the other cup. Over 18 months, he made over $5 million for the firm he worked for, and he was earning $75,000 at that time in the 90s, which is $125K in today's dollars. And then shortly thereafter, he moved to another firm and was making 6 figures. So something as simple as paper clips can be really helpful. And I will tell you that when I started my business and I came across this story, I have 2 cups on my desk and I have paper clips, and I think of it as networking or making friends. And I reach out to a certain number of people every single day to just touch base, say, hey, I would love to put some time on the calendar, would love to talk. Sometimes it's following up with old clients. But it's been a very helpful strategy for me to stay in front of people that I can potentially pull business from, and then also to reconnect. There are 5 habit triggers. So if you're thinking about changing something in your business and you want to build a habit around it, a routine that you can kind of get yourself on board with, the first thing to do is think about what is the trigger, what's the thing that's going to start it. So a time factor in the morning, you can take a shower, brush your teeth, get dressed, and eat breakfast, right? So that's in the morning. I also include a workout in the morning. Location, right? So if you are in a certain location, say at a gym, and you use that location for your warm-up, even those days when you don't want to work out, that warm-up location can help you get into the flow of things. Before dinner each night, I think of one thing that I'm grateful for during the day. I often do my gratitude practice when I'm brushing my teeth. The emotional state you're in, if you're stressed, you can use that as a trigger for deep breathing. So the technique for deep breathing is 3 seconds of in breath, inhaling, 1 second of holding it, and 5 seconds out. And you do that 5 times. That's very helpful. And then the people around you, there is a study that shows that if you are around someone who's obese, you have a 57% more of a chance of also getting to that place. And for those of us who maybe don't normally drink, if you're around people who do drink, you'll probably start drinking. So be careful about habits, because it can trigger both positive as well as negative habits. Technology. I know that I have leaned on technology quite heavily in my business in order to automate things. I'm a firm believer in automating, delegating, or eliminating work as much as possible. But these are the key considerations when I'm checking into technology for my business. I had a virtual assistant that I started working with a couple of years ago. And one of the first things Kyle said is, you need a password manager. And I was like, what the heck is a password manager? And I use LastPass, and it captures your password as you type into things. And I have to tell you, this thing has saved me so many times. There is a cryptocurrency company up in Canada where they had over $100 billion or $1 million of cryptocurrency locked away, and the CEO had it all locked away under one single password. That CEO passed away, and he was the only one who knew the password. And so those millions of dollars are locked up because nobody knew the password. So think about how you're managing your technology and all of those platforms that you use in your business, and make sure you've got some way, if something happened to you, whether it's you get sick, perhaps with a virus, and you're maybe in the hospital for a period of time, or you have something else come up, make sure that you are thinking ahead to how can you ensure that your company and your business moves forward without a lot of hiccups. Project management. I'm curious, how many of you actually use a project management software? Do any of you? You might not. You may just have a list of your to-dos and the sequence of doing things. But I have found project management software, especially if I hire contractors to help me with work, to be very helpful. I love Trello. I've used things like Basecamp and Microsoft Project over the course of my career, but project management software, if you've got a number of people working on a project, can be very powerful. I would imagine more of you have a CRM. How many of you have a CRM? Any of you?
Yes.
Yes. Which one do you have?
Yes.
It's called One Page.
Ah, okay.
We use one called Suite.
Okay. I found these to be very powerful in order for me to keep track of my relationships with my customers. And I happen to use Active Campaign, which is my email marketing, which I assume many of you have those as well. So if you have not invested and looked at some of these tools, I've suggested that you do so, because they can be really powerful. Cloud storage and file sharing, gone are the days where you store everything on your computer, right? Most of us have one or more of these that we use in our businesses. It's incredibly powerful if you're somewhere where, I know I've had speaking events where I couldn't get to my my file on my thumb drive for whatever reason, and was able to get to things through the files that were in the cloud. So this can also be another powerful way to streamline your business and make sure that you've got things backed up. Time, your most precious commodity. One of the things that I realized when I left the corporate world and started my business is that you can't say yes to everything. And there are tactics to make sure that you're managing your time appropriately, right? So you can't say yes to everything, so you got to get good at saying no. You need to double check yourself if you're allowing interruptions and if you're always reachable. I know there are portions of my day, I try to time block and have 1 to 2 portions of my day that are 90 minutes in length, where I don't respond to emails, I don't respond to phone calls, and I'm just heads down working. If I can get one or two of those in a day, I'm pretty productive. Not having time limits. So let's say you have a certain amount of time allocated to something, and you don't time block it, right? You don't have an end. And then letting people or meetings run late, right? Letting things run over. I think those are incredibly important habits to get into, is to make sure that 5 minutes before time is up, that you're paying attention to the time and you're not allowing things to run over. Time tracking. I use Harvest. I had a client who used Harvest in terms of time tracking. If you want to understand why your business maybe isn't producing the way you think it should, or maybe your team isn't, have people track their time in, say, 15-minute increments so that you get a sense of what are people working on. I think this is an incredibly powerful tool, not only for those of us who may charge per hour or track hours as a way to understand, did you bid your projects and consulting things correctly, but to just understand what are you spending the most time on, in order to understand whether it's actually productive use of your time or not. And then how many of you have read the document Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy? Has anybody read that? Nobody's read Eat the Frog? Okay.
Has that been out for a while?
Oh, it's been out for forever.
Yeah, I'm an old guy. I think I did read that back in the early 90s maybe. Does it go back? Yeah.
It goes way back. I love it. I often will give it to people, and I'm happy to send it. I'll send it to you guys as a free gift so you can read it. It's a good example. It gives you multiple ways and methodologies of prioritizing your work and thinking about what's most important. And Eat That Frog, that just comes from the initial story in the book about doing the hardest thing on your plate first in the morning. Like, just get it out of the way, because so many times that takes up mind space as we're trying to get things done throughout the day. So you eat the frog first, and then you move on to the rest of the things. But I'm happy to give that away as a free gift. Disconnecting time from income. When I started my consulting business, I read a book by Alan Weiss about consulting, and I do this when I bid on consulting projects. I typically will say, for these types of deliverables and this process of making those happen, the amount that I will charge you is X. Instead of saying, I'll do these deliverables and my estimation of my time is this, and my hourly wage or hourly rate that I'll bill you is this. Disconnecting time from income is really important. Another way I do this is I've got some coaching programs and things where I have recorded modules and webinars, and then I allow people to have access to those if they pay a certain fee. And so you can multiply your time by recording things and making things easily accessible. So let's say you're onboarding a new client, for those of you who are in the fractional CFO, COO business, maybe you're onboarding somebody. If you find yourself saying the same thing to clients again and again, think about preparing that kind of onboarding documents that you need people to fill out and creating a webinar and recording it, say on Zoom like we are this morning, and then using that to onboard people instead of having to set up that initial phone call as an onboarding. But if you could deploy that, send it out to folks, and then have them reach out to you for maybe a shorter call after they've watched that, then again, you're maximizing your time without losing some of that personal touch. So think about how you use your time and disconnect time from income. Stop making to-do lists. This is tough for me because I'm a big list maker, but it has also helped me not overschedule. So the concept here is, if you have something to do, put it on your calendar, block the time. And if you find yourself without the time, well, then you've probably overbooked yourself, right, and overcommitted, which means that you got to get really good at saying no. And I know when I struggle with saying no to someone because I don't want to disappoint them, or I'm feeling guilty about something, I will often go back into the web actually, and Google, how do you say no professionally, or how do you say no with grace? And you'll often find scripts and things that you can use about how to say no. So I encourage you to think about that. Warren Buffett is a great example of a gentleman who says no a lot. He does not work on a lot of things. He works on a very few number of things. And I think most of us would say the man has been fairly successful in his life. The other thing I have recognized in myself is that when I do certain work matters. So for morning people versus night people, there's a distinct time of day when you should do distinct types of work. So this comes from a book called When by Daniel Pink. There are morning people who are larks, and then night people. And we cycle through this peak, trough, and recovery a few times a day. So if you pay attention to how you are and when your peak energy cycles are throughout the day, peaks, generally for morning people, are the best time to do hardcore analytics work. And I find that this is the case for me. So I will do the hard analytics, crunching through spreadsheets and those kinds of things first thing in the morning. Midday is usually when I do some administrative things, and things like just responding to emails and things that take less time. And then in the late afternoon, if I'm writing, if I'm creating a new PowerPoint for a presentation or something like that, I'll often do the insight or creative work. So pay attention to your work and classify it by analytics, admin, and more insight creative kinds of things. And then what portion of the day where you can get the maximum out of yourself for those different types of work. I also think self-care is a secret to productivity. And that is, for me, if I don't eat right, if I don't go for a walk, if I don't get some activity in my day, I don't have the same energy. It also means that I have certain habits around my mindset that I do. So I have certain things that I do in the mornings that are about creating a space in terms of meditation and some other things that help me manage my mindset. And then there's stress management that I do as well. And then the other component for me, it wasn't until I dialed in my sleep that I really felt like I was maximizing my productivity. So if you find yourself lagging or just not quite working up to the greatest speed that you can and producing enough, think about these 5 things and dial in which one maybe you're not spending enough time on, and spend the time on it, because it can be incredibly powerful. There's also a 10-3-2-1-0 formula that Craig Ballantyne suggests. I love waking up early in the morning. I think people think I'm somewhat crazy. I know my kids do, because I'm kind of a 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning type of person, which means I also turn into a pumpkin by 9 o'clock at night. But I manage and make sure that I don't have caffeine too late in the day, as well as food and alcohol. I make sure they're not too close to bedtime either. I also make sure that I don't look at the screen before I go to bed, because that has a way of keeping me up. And then this is the hard one, is the number of times you hit the snooze button in the morning is 0. I know that was a really hard one for me to embrace, but it definitely helps me not procrastinate. This is the power.
For the record here, true confessions.
Yeah.
I do exactly the opposite of every one of those things you just
Do
listed.
you really?
I've got some work to do, obviously.
Yeah, it's tough. But I have to tell you, from my sleep, my quality of sleep has gotten better if I eliminate the screens and I stop work and the food, and I definitely the caffeine, and push that to the first part of the day, but no later than noon. I sleep and I'm much better in my day if I manage to this list, but it's tough. I agree. Have any of you heard of Warren Buffett's power of elimination rule? So this goes back to the power of saying no. So the story goes that Warren was talking to his pilot, and his pilot had been with him for more than 10 years. And he asked his pilot to make a list of things that he wanted to accomplish, 25 things. And so he did that. And they ranked those, then the pilot ranked those things in the order of importance and circled the top 5. And Warren asked him, what are you going to do with the rest, the remaining 20? And what Warren told him after the pilot said, well, I'll work on them as I get time. Obviously, the first 5 are important, are the most important. And Warren said, no, you have to avoid those at all costs. Because these things, when you give them attention, you won't succeed in your top 5. And so there are times when I challenge myself and I don't even focus on the top 5. I'll focus on the top 2 or 3 to get really clear in my mind about what are the most powerful things. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, eating the frog and shifting as a large company employee whose time was pretty much sucked up in meetings that I didn't find a whole lot of value in most of the time. For me, when I think of eating the frog and doing the most important things, it's what are the things that are going to drive revenue, and what are those kind of key business development things that I can do each day to ensure that I've got a steady stream of leads that can potentially be turned into sales. So it's a matter of prioritization and being really ruthless about how you do that. Processes. How many of you type up notes versus handwriting notes? What's your preference? Type or handwrite?
Handwrite.
Handwrite.
Yeah. So our brains, if you handwrite versus typing, are much more likely to remember it. You will automatically start processing and thinking about how to solve things, and you'll make different connections by handwriting. So whenever I see somebody, and I have to admit there are still times I will type because I can type far faster than I can write, but I try to just bring a notebook and a pen and write, because that's a much more powerful way to do things. I also, yeah.
Just a question and maybe a little bit of pushback on the typing. I started to type everything because I can store it and retrieve it a lot more easily, and it saves me time from translating notes into an electronic document.
Yeah, I would agree. I do fall into typing when I'm talking to like in introductory sales calls with folks. I tend to do that. But if I'm working with a client, I'm sitting across from them in a conference room or on a call, I will often handwrite. I also have a device that, and you can use devices and you can handwrite, and then it will turn it into text and then put it into your electronic files as well. But no, I agree with you. But just be careful about the typing of notes. If you really want to kind of embed things in your brain, handwriting has been seen to be better. And I will tell you, I have a 16-year-old daughter who's in high school, and she goes to Devlin High School, which is one of the top-ranked high schools in the state of Colorado. And they handwrite. They are not all on Chromebooks, I know, or iPads. I know a lot of schools are in that space, but they make these kids, they handwrite their notes, they handwrite things because they know that's what gets into their brains and helps them retain information better. So for what it's worth, I know we all like to maintain notes and things, but handwriting has been proven to be better if you're going to retain the information. This I learned from a management consultant a couple decades ago, and I have a hand on the screen because when you're sitting across from somebody and you're doing some action planning, who produces what, with what, by when, and why, the because. So it's a good just memory kind of a jog. And if I'm doing action planning, I typically pull up a spreadsheet or have a table in a Word document, and I put these things in there. And it's a really good way to drive accountability across teams. And I think one of the most important components of this is not just who produces what by when, but the with what. Do you have the resources, the motivation, and authority to do it? And the fifth one, which is why. Because too many times I've seen people say yes to doing certain types of work, but the why is often missing. So from an action planning perspective, this is a simple way to do that. Productivity is about practicing the 4 Ds, right? Delegate, delay, delete, do, or what I like to think is also delegate, eliminate, or I said it earlier and I've forgotten the third one, but you get the point. Try to get rid of things or do them if they're short and simple, and you can do it in less than 5 minutes. I try to delegate everything that isn't in my zone of genius. I've got a virtual assistant. I've also got my 16-year-old daughter that I'm trying to get trained so that she can function in the business world. And so I delegate things to her because she had to find a summer job, and her lifeguarding job didn't happen this summer like she had planned. And so pay attention to the work that you're doing and make sure you're focusing on what is your zone of genius.
Wasn't it activate?
Activate, that could have been it too. Yeah, thank you. Know your marketing 4 Ps, right? Product, place, promotion, price. You know, what are you selling? Who needs it? The place. How are you promoting it? And then your price. And, you know, cycle through those again and again and again. I know when I'm sometimes working with my coaching clients and trying to get them to maximize their job search efforts and drive better results in a shorter amount of time, we go through these 4 things. But even as my business, I will often touch base on these things and think for the next quarter, what are the things that I'm trying to sell? Who am I trying to sell them to? What's my promotion or marketing strategy? How am I going to be visible to the right folks? And then obviously is my pricing correct in that space? Whoops. Where do you see yourself in your business in 5 years? And I know in the world that we're living in right now, we've got lots of uncertainty. I've been listening to some webinars. Inc. magazine has been having some major thought leaders do free webinars on a weekly basis. So if you're not on the email list for that, I would suggest you get on it. I've gotten some fascinating insights from some senior leaders and across a variety of different industries and people who are investing in a number of different types of companies in terms of what do they see as trends in different industries and in different professions and different things across the nation and across the world. So make sure you're spending some of your time not just working on today, but thinking of where do you need to be in 5 years. I think some of the most important things that we've seen in recent months have been an escalation in terms of people embracing virtual meetings and technology and things like that. I think the other piece is workplaces are going to be a hybrid model going forward. So for those of you who are in that leadership and HR space, I think helping organizations deal with both people who are in the office as well as people who are working from home will be critical. And then how do you build culture and maximize productivity when you've got those two things going on, because the communications and the way you work with folks is different. But pay attention to the long term and not just the short. Plan for the 3 Ds, and nobody likes to think about this, but death, disability, and divorce happen. And so think about in your business, what would you do if one or more of those things happen to happen? Make sure that you're planning for that. I know that I have a group of folks that I work with, and we work with a lot of folks who are dealing with these things, and they didn't anticipate these things happen, and then it's a mad scramble to try to figure out what to do. I had the experience of having both death and disability impact me. My husband passed away about 10 years ago, and he had 10 years before that where he was disabled. And so I got a crash course on how does your life change when you have these types of events happen. So I'm very conscious of making sure that I've got estate planning, and that for my business, I've got records and things lined up. So if something happened to me, somebody could step in and take care of things. So as you're thinking about short term, think about some of those things you don't want to think about. And then this is one of the most powerful books that I've ever read. Bronnie Ware wrote a book about the top regrets of those who have died. And so I think these are really good touch points for those of us who are looking at their runway to retirement, or maybe we're working in an industry where we love what we do so much that we can't imagine retiring fully. But don't let the pull and tug of work get you to a place where you don't do some of these other things, right? So I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not a life others expected of me. So being truly authentic to who you are. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends, and I wish that I had let myself be happier. My call to action, I didn't finish this last night when I was up late, because I think you guys all know your call to action for the day. Pick one or two of these things and make it happen. What I would love is to be able to obviously send you the recording of this. It's just a reminder of some things that you could potentially work on in your business, and I'll happy to send you guys a Stay Connected survey as well as that Eat the Frog document to help you as well in terms of prioritization and eating that frog, that thing that maybe you're avoiding. With that, I'll open it up to questions, or maybe sharing of some habits and things that you do in your life and business life that you think are really powerful.
Oh, Denise, I just wanted to comment. Excellent presentation. Covered a lot of great ground. Are we just going to get a recording or also the slides?
Which do you prefer?
I think maybe both would be helpful.
Okay.
I was raising my hand because Focal Point was founded by Brian Tracy, so I'm definitely an Eat That Frog guy. I even teach a class in that with the workbook and the whole.
Oh, good.
It's one of the most cost-effective things that I do because it's pretty low cost, low tech, but very impactful.
It is. I hand it out as often as I can to folks because I think it's just a really powerful way to kind of rethink the use of your time.
I was making a comment about the typing versus handwriting notes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I finally succumbed about a year ago and got an iPad. But I think one of the key things of getting an iPad or that kind of technology is also getting the Apple Pencil.
Yes.
So it allows you to write digitally. And I find that writing on there digitally, then at least my notes are always captured and they're stored, electronically. They might not be converted to text, but I can, if I just type the name of the person I'm meeting with, then I can do a search in notes to pull up that person and see all my handwritten notes that I took from, whatever time I met with them, kind of thing. So a digital pencil in an iPad technology is a good way to go to handwriting, but still be able to store it electronically.
Awesome. That's a great point. Yeah, we have so many tools. I also use a Rocket notebook where I can write in it, and then I can capture it on my phone, and then I can store it and it goes into the cloud. So I do that as well.
I'd like to echo what Dan said. That was probably, if not the best presentation, one of the best 3 we've had at CTA since I've been in for 4 years. So,
oh, good.
The one thing that you did not discuss, and I'd like to hear your input on, pipeline development. Where do you sit on pipeline development, and what do you do with your clients to help define and improve their pipeline?
So in terms of pipeline, in terms of leads that generate into sales, is that what you're getting at?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. So what I tell people, it depends on whether you've got a product or a service. I think one of the things that I've found to be most important for me, it depends on where you're at in your business, right? So I'm going to go back to that initial slide where I showed the flow chart of when you hire people. And I took a lot of mastermind programs when I first started my business, because I knew I needed to get out of that corporate big company space into how do you run a small business. So when I first started my business, I did a lot of speaking, just reaching out to people who knew me, knew my work, and to get referrals, right? So those are still some core activities that I do. As I got further along and I started making more revenue and I started hiring people, I now have a blog writer who writes my blog posts for me, and those help me from an SEO perspective. They also become social media posts. They also become things for my email, to my email list. I also hired a PR person this last year, and if anybody needs to talk to somebody who's good at PR, I started doing podcasts. How many of you have done a podcast interview? Have any of you done that?
Yes.
Okay. Here's what I found through that. One, there's tons of podcasts out there, right? And they're all looking for thought leaders and people to show up. And it's a super easy way, instead of me getting with a group like yours and speaking, or before the virus when I would speak in person, podcasts are a great way to get recorded, share your thought leadership, it forces you to kind of synthesize and be succinct in what your message is and to your ideal clients. And what Crystal helped me do is find podcasts that would have my ideal clients as the audience. I do the podcasts, and now I have this database that makes me look like a thought leader. I can use them on social media, and I have pulled sales out of those. People will listen to me, and I've had people reach out to me and say, oh my gosh, I listened to that podcast twice because you gave such great tips. So I do that. I also I work with my virtual assistant. He works with a lot of coaches and consultants in Denver, as well as here in the US. And Kyle and I do a quarterly social media planning piece. And so we plan what are the topics, what are the things we want to get out on which days and on which social media platform. And I'm just on 2 because I'm all about simple. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. And what are we going to post where to those ideal audiences that I'm trying to capture. And then I'm really big on one-on-one networking and making friends and staying visible to the right people. So I'm specific about what groups I'm in terms of the HR community here in the Denver market. And for those of you who are in the benefits or HR space, if you want to reach out to me and let's have a conversation individually, I'm happy to help open up my network to you to see if there's anybody that I know that might be a target client of yours that you'd like to bring into your book of business. But those are the tactics that I use. So, but I stayed simple when I had first started, and then I've slowly expanded as I've gotten more time and my business has grown.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other ideas that you guys do? Because obviously there's a lot of wisdom on this phone call that you guys can share with each other. Anything that I'm not doing that you guys are doing that you find successful?
Most disagree, but we still cold call.
Do you
As
really?
a firm, yeah, definitely. And supplement the podcasting, the LinkedIn, Facebook, and all that. We find and it goes back to the paperclip thing. You know, the proof is in the pudding. You know, the
It
gentleman
is.
that's doing the 200, and so put 50 paper clips in one cup, and if you make 50 calls a week, I promise you, your business is going to take off. And most people say, I'm referral only. I respect that, but we have a lot of success with outbound talking to strangers.
Okay. I worked with one investment advisor. He needed help. He was spending too much time setting up appointments, and because I'm an HR person and I deal in compensation, we designed a job where he just had that person, where he had a list of people when he had been doing speaking events and stuff. He didn't have time to follow up, so he had this person calling those people, telling them that they work for him, touching base with them, and trying to get him appointments on his calendar. I do know other people who cold call, and it works. I think you have to have the right approach in terms of script and how you go about it, and so you're poking at their pain points enough that they go, oh yeah, I do need this. But yeah, it can work.
I'll chime in here. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say that's Peter Kendall's whole business, right? It's cold calling.
Peter. Yeah,
Yeah,
Peter.
exactly,
That's what
Peter.
he does.
Yeah, I was going to say that a year ago, we pivoted our focus on lead generation. And we're a former client of Peter's. And so what we looked at with the shift in our markets that were happening, we had hired a market research firm to give us an idea of what was going on out there in the markets. And so we shifted more to inbound marketing, content marketing like you do, Denise.
Yeah.
And getting that out. And what we found is that since the majority of our leads were coming through referrals, that we needed to bifurcate our program. And so we spent about 1/3 of our effort on prospecting and 2/3 of our effort trying to deepen the relationships with our referral network.
Yep.
And with, we like to say it's a polite drip campaign that we're doing with people.
Yeah.
And that has been working for us. And then by way of example, a couple of weeks ago, I got a call from a private equity firm that I haven't talked to in 10 years, but they're receiving our blogs. I got a call from a woman that I worked with 15 years ago and haven't talked to in 5 years, and she gets our blog. And so it's been that process that has helped us. And so we're not doing the cold calling anymore. We're not doing the direct mail. And yet our revenues are up 25%.
You know, that's a good point. Direct mail. I created, I don't know how many of you guys use Canva, but you can do basic design kinds of things. And I created some postcards, and then I found leads through the Denver Business Journal. And I would just handwrite postcards and send them off to certain companies and senior leaders and people that I thought I could help with what my services are. And I also have a 16-year-old daughter who's looking to make some money. And so I have her write postcards for me. And I have pulled some business in from that. One of the other techniques I do is I look across my sales, each quarter, and I go, what drove that sale? How did I get that sale? And then I double down on those types of things that actually converted.
If I can shift here just a second, Denise, and tap into your experience and expertise on compensation.
Yeah.
Is there a general rule of thumb on what's a good ratio between salary and at-risk performance pay? Asking for a friend. No, I just running into a lot of this with several of our clients, and then kind of dovetailing with that, with owners trying to make decisions with their payroll and what have you.
Yeah.
Temporary layoff versus permanent. Keep my A players, let go my last in, first out folks.
Yeah.
Cutting back 401k match, all these. I know there's a lot in that. I don't mean to overwhelm, but just, is there a general rule of thumb on those types of things?
So let me talk about the pay mix. It's called pay mix, right? How much do you give in base pay versus how much do you put at risk? It depends on the job. So I'll give you an example. So if somebody's more in a direct sales position, they will have more at risk typically than someone who is more in an administrative staff. So it really depends on the job. If you personally, if you're a business or you have a client who needs help with that, feel free to give them my name and number. I offer free 15-minute strategy calls. So happy to talk somebody through that and give them some guidance and advice on that. You don't want to put people who don't have work that if you've got too much at risk, you won't keep people. Now, I will say there are organizations who will put more at risk just because from a cultural perspective, they want to incent people to perform through their at-risk pay components, but it depends on the job is the simple answer. And in terms of like temporary layoffs, which are furloughs, laid off, or pay cuts, which I've seen happen, those three components have happened a lot here in the last few months as organizations had to cut expenses and labor costs because revenue went down and we're dealing with this virus. How you bring people back in order to comply with all the laws and things, how do you bring people back? Because there's the PPP loans, the economic disaster relief loans, right? Through the small business, SBA, there's a lot of different components to that. And so it can get very complicated very quickly. So again, happy to talk to anybody who's dealing with that. But I love getting to help businesses think through how do you manage labor cost in the right way in order to meet your business goals. I would also say that we're at unprecedented times, and I think to some extent, what worked in the past may not work in this space because it's such an uncertain time and we've never dealt with something like this before. So it's complicated.
Thank you.
Yeah. What
Denise,
else?
I really liked the phrase that stuck out to me is zone of genius. I've never heard, never heard those three words pieced together. And I think of that in both my business and like my, recently it's come up, we have an old Victorian home, and I have realized that I am not a fix-it man. I'm not a, so I also think of like, my best days with work, it's when I'm doing, it's like this combination of things I feel equipped and skilled for, have some level of expertise or knowledge, and then things I like doing.
Exactly.
And when those overlap, that's a fun day.
And be ruthless. I'll give you an example that I've had to like do in my life. So my zone of genius is doing the HR stuff, the coaching, and those kinds of things. But there are certain things like editing videos and doing things I just don't like it, and so I pass it off to somebody else and have them do it. And I'd much rather review the first or second draft from somebody than have to start it from scratch if it's not in my zone of genius. So I do a lot of like delegating and let other folks where they like doing that stuff, let them do it. I would also say that one of the things that I learned many years ago was if I can make more money per hour and then I can let pay somebody else to do it. So cleaning my house, mowing my lawn. I have hired at different points in my life when I was crazy busy, personal chefs to create meals that were in my freezer so I could just pull them out and feed my family, and I wasn't meal prep. And I love to cook, but there were times when I was too busy to do that. So be really conscious of both what you're doing for your work, but also those tugs in your personal life, because your time and attention is your most valuable commodity or most valuable resource. So if you're getting pulled into mowing the lawn and doing yard work and you could pass that off to somebody else and they can do it for less money than what you could earn in your business, then why are you doing it, right? Unless you really enjoy it. So be conscious of both places in your life so that you can craft, spend your time in the right way, right?
Cool.
What else?
Denise, it's Soraya.
Hi, Soraya.
Hi, I had a question and also throwing it out to the group. So I'm working with a couple of clients right now who are frankly on systems overload. All those systems that you mentioned up front, Trello, Asana, etc. They have LastPass, Bill.com. They have tons of systems. So I am working with them to streamline and frankly reduce their systems.
Sure.
Do you happen to know of a systems strategist or anyone on the call who can come in and say, you've got Asana, it doesn't talk to this, so get rid of this, keep that, keep this, get rid of that, to make it more streamlined?
Soraya, I do know somebody who might, yes, her name is Nancy. Let me reach out to Nancy and introduce you, Soraya.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
She's good at streamlining processes. I'm not sure if she exactly matches this, but she's good at this. So let me make an intro to you too.
Yeah, and it's not really processes that I'm looking for.
But it's systems. Like if I could replace these 3 with this 1, can I?
Yeah,
make it easier?
It's not a process yet. We're not at that stage.
Systems.
It's really purely systems.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll make an introduction, Soraya.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe you know Ben Allen, and Ben's the CTO, and he can help them at the strategy level down to the plumbing level. And so I think you should reach out to him.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm really looking for someone who's a doer. Not that Ben is not a doer, but someone who's going to come in and maybe do a 2-week engagement and really say, you've got 15 different things just managing your invoices, and keep this, kill all of that. That's sort of the goal. But that's a great suggestion, Dave. I'll reach out to Ben.
Denise, Dave again.
Yeah.
A little bit about your relationship with your clients. Are those your angel wings hanging on the wall behind you that you use with clients?
I hope they think of me as an angel that I could swoop in and make things better for them. But those are angel wings. Yes. Yeah. Any other comments, any other habits or routines or things that you guys want to share with each other? Because this is an important topic to share, because a lot of you have been in business for many years and have found ways to make things easier.
Well, Denise, I think, and this is Robin, I think a challenge we continue to face, all of us, I think, is it's very easy to get sucked into emails.
Yes.
And, we live in a society now that really sort of demands that you don't miss emails, because if you do, it can reflect poorly on you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm curious to hear what your philosophy is for not getting sucked into your emails.
So my philosophy on that is to set boundaries, and this was really hard for me because I know what you mean. So I will check emails first thing in the morning, and then I shut it off, and then midday, and then at the end of the day. So I check emails 3 times a day, and then otherwise I try to ignore them. Because and if anybody wants to read some great books, I have a list on my website, and I can put that in the email I sent to all of you guys as a follow-up. But there's a book called Deep Work. And when you get interrupted, it takes a good 15-20 minutes to get back into that state of flow where you can really be productive. And so what I have learned is if I can keep the blinders on, and sometimes I'll even put the phone in another room, or I'll shut it off completely, lockdown, so I'm not paying attention to emails, and I am just focused on what I need to produce in terms of the deliverables that day, that can be very powerful. So for me, it's putting specific times of the day where I will do emails. I have one friend of mine who only checks emails once a day, and it's midday. So that's the way she manages things. I would also say there's a book from Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Workday. Tim Ferriss, I follow him because he's a thought leader and he thinks of the work, does things differently in the world, but just boundaries are really, really important, I think.
So if I could do a follow-up on that. So the nature of some of the emails, it could be something as mundane as setting up a meeting.
Right.
And so you go back and forth on that until the meeting's set, and it would be inefficient to try to set that meeting at 3 different parts of the day. So it's almost as though you have to understand some of the differences in the types of emails that you're responding to.
So I'm going to give you an example. In terms of meetings, I have, so you can schedule a free meeting, a 15-minute call on OneSub. So that's schedule once technology software where people can get access to my calendar and they can schedule a 15, 30, or 60-minute meeting, and I don't have to go back and forth. Sometimes it's those small little backs and forths that can suck up a lot of your time. So I would look through what's in your email, and then if you want to have a conversation about what you're seeing a lot of your time being spent on, I'm happy to share some things that might automate some stuff for you.
Sounds good.
Hey, Robin, this is Paul. I've had another idea too. I have my admin has access to my email. Once you get to a right size company, you know, she can go in and respond to a lot of those emails on my behalf.
Yep.
And that just takes it completely out. So I have her do a lot of tasks that, you know, a lot of those emails that I need to send, she does it for me. And,
I would second that. I will, if I'm busy and I need to heads down work on a project for a client, my virtual assistant, I have scripts that I've pre-written for him. And I've said, if somebody asks for this, here's what you need to say. If somebody asks for this, here's what you need to say. If I'm booking a speaking event, here's the follow-up things, and here's when this needs to go out. And automating emails that are related to speaking events. So you can do a ton. How many of you guys know Reggie Rivers? Has anybody ever seen Reggie speak? Okay. So Reggie's former NFL player, speaker, has a business where he also has like, does things with charities and has a number of amazing speakers and stuff in the Denver area. I did a speaking event with Reggie one time and we were sitting next to each other, and he has automated so much in terms of using Google Forms and different things in order to intake speaking clients and then automate emails in terms of what he needs to line things up that generate contracts and so forth. And so there's a ton of different things that you can use from a systems and technology perspective to automate basic things to get yourself out of that admin junk so that you can work in that zone of genius area. So again, if anybody wants to talk about that and brainstorm about what you're dealing with, reach out. Happy to share what I use or what I've heard other people using.
I had one more suggestion. I hadn't heard it mentioned yet, but there's an app or a technology called Loom, L-O-O-M. And what it does is it records your screen. It's almost similar to like doing a Zoom call and recording it and then posting it to YouTube, but it takes one step out of it. And so I use this for my staff all the time. So anytime I'm doing a task, you know, I'll record it and I'll send it not only to the person, the staff that's going to do the task, I'll send it to other staff and saying, hey, just so you know, just in case you need to, you know how to do this bookkeeping task. Like there was an easy one the other day. We were talking about, you know, reclassifying transactions for the PPP program. Yeah. So every client we have is putting their transactions, all their payroll is going into payroll, and it all has to be reclassified as a PPP expense. So I did this video, you know, from one staff who had a specific question. So here's how you do it. And then immediately sent it to all my other staff. So now they all know exactly how to reclassify this thing. So I, you know, was reusing my time. You know, it's very similar to what Denise was saying. If you have an onboarding thing or any of those things, like Loom is a great tool. It's free. There's a paid version as well, but it's definitely worth checking out. If you have anything that you need to send to staff or anybody for multiple, and just to do it once and have it, you know, people see it, that's great.
I do that with my 16-year-old daughter, right? They don't like read things. They like videos, right? That's what these kids do. So like I needed her to update my website. And so I took a picture of me updating my website with a new speaking event and some other things. And I put it in a little library for her out in the cloud. And I said, here's how you update this website. Here's how you update this website. I've used those types of task recordings for my VA. I've also done, I have one videographer I've used to create speaker reels and things like that. And when I get stuck and I'm like, I could write a long email or I could try to reach him with a phone call. But sometimes I'll just do a recording of my feedback to people, like even resumes or LinkedIn profiles. I'll do a recording of here's what I think you need to change. And I'll send them the recording instead of typing up an email because I can talk far faster than, even though I'm a good typist. So there's all sorts of little things that you can do that can speed things up that can make a big difference.
Denise, this is awesome. Thank you for all you do and all you've done today.
You're welcome. My pleasure. I hope it's been helpful. And again, stay in touch.
Yeah. Dan, shall we facilitate some 3x3s? And
yeah, let's do it, Willie. How do you want to set it up today? You want just everyone to just go around the room like we would typically would?
Yeah, let's actually, I've got my screen right here. So get your